Chapter 4, Belly of the Beast. Cush finally arrived on the following day around 3 p.m. Big Ma saw him on a hovercraft. "Boy, where you get that from?" Cush smiled. "I been had it, I just don't come around here on it. It's for long trips, but it is perfect for fishing. You wanna go in the morning?" With a big smile on her face, Big Ma said, "Hell yeah, I ain't been fishing in a minute." Cush shook his head. "You and me both. That's why I brought it along. First thing in the morning, we'll head out to the Mississippi River and get some good old catfish and maybe a few of those big bone buffaloes." Big Ma said, "Sounds like a deal to me." "Hold on, we ain't going on that there thing, is we?" Cush said, "Yeah, Big Ma, it'll take us 45 minutes to an hour on horseback, but it'll only take 5 minutes on this. Plus, this can seat up to 8 people, and the back is for our tackle boxes and coolers. It is wider and more comfortable than a sky craft." Big Ma hesitated. "Child, I ain't never been on one of those things. Your grandfather tried to get me to take a ride once or twice, and I refused." Cush, looking disappointed, "Big Ma, come on now, I'll be fun. Just think of it like a..." Big Ma replied before he could finish his sentence, "I ain't never been in one of dem neither, but for you, I'll give it a try." Cush smiled. "You didn't even let me finish, but that's great." Cush parked the hovercraft near the front door. Big Ma looked. "This thing doesn't make no noise at all." Cush said, "No, it's quiet as a mouse and perfect for combat." Big Ma shook her head. "Show you right. Well, you can stay in the room where Dexter, Pam, Sweets, Baby Bruh, and all my grandchildren and great-grandchildren stayed." Cush said, "I'm going to straighten up and get my things put up." Big Ma said, "Alright, I gonna fixed us some barbecue ribs, with some tata salad, and homemade biscuits." Cush's mouth watered. "Big Ma, I'm glad I came over." Big Ma smiled. "Me too." Cush made a few trips before he got everything in his room. "Billy, you there?" Billy said, "No, I'm in south of France, drink on Mai Tai." "Why y'all always asking that shit? Where else can I go? I'm an AI without a body." Cush laughed. "Well, do you want to be bothered with me?" Billy said, "What can I do for you, Cush?" Cush said, "I want to hear something while I straighten this mess out." Billy said, "I have a wide range of jazz and R&B that you like." Cush said, "Maybe later. How about some words from Prophetess Akila Malik? Got anything on her?" Billy said, "Sure, your grandfather uploaded a lot. Which do you prefer?" Cush replied, "Whatever, you pick one." Billy said, "Here's one of your grandfather's favorite sermon from Prophetess Akila Malik." Silent for a moment, Cush hears. "I had an absolutely amazing visitation from what seemed to be half a dozen ancient African queens. Unlike anything I've ever experienced. A couple of them were Nubian Egyptian. Others from very ancient, powerful African empires. They came to share some pretty deep revelations with me about how our people, who ruled the earth from the four corners, west, east, north, and south, for thousands of years, fell from glory. Not simply due to the dominance of invading colonizers, but the weaknesses and infighting amongst ourselves. Created openings for invasions. They spoke of the loss of celestial or heavenly divine knowledge that made us the healthiest, long-lived beings on the planet. They spoke about the suppression of African high spiritual knowledge of science as the process of creation, mathematics as the geometric structure of the universe, art as the expression of creative laws, and music as the language that unites the cosmic laws, and about how we have forgotten how to speak the language of life, which allowed us to communicate with our bodies and its intricate structures to maintain health, which is our wealth, and so much more. I was humbled in the presence of such vast lost knowledge given by the Creator to the first and oldest civilization on Earth. In the black woman's mitochondrial DNA is the original book of life. This is why she was the first targeted for destruction and control by the destroyers of genetic, scientific, and biological history. She remains so, from the poisoning of her genes to the corruption of her mind. So that she would not remember her power of recreation hidden in the library of her DNA, so that she would be forced to submit to generations of abuse, but she would be conditioned to abuse herself. You come from a long line of queens, they told me, which was proven by my genetic ancestry reports. They spoke of the Remimesu, or the rebirthing and renewal, that is to come for our people. As Maya Angelou rightly predicted, we will rise. Many of us will awaken truly. The sun will continue its awakening. And the radiation it dispenses to the planet will trigger genetic transformation in many who are melanin dominant, breaking the cycle of disease and death that began 1,000 years ago. There is more to come in the days ahead as I attempt to piece together our story told in the voice of the ancient ones, whose records were destroyed centuries ago. The original Black history, so many of our Black scholars have been trying to recollect for decades. It was a truly transformative experience. I was honored. In the vein of Marcus Garvey, lift your heads, you mighty people. We are not forgotten. Cush listened for hours, ate dinner, and drifted off to sleep. Cush got up early the following morning to make some adjustments to the hovercraft so that Big Ma would feel more comfortable. Before he finished, he heard Big Ma calling, "Cush." Cush shouted, "I'm outside finishing up some modification. I'll be there in a second." Big Ma shouted back, "Alright, breakfast is ready when you are." Cush quickly finished up and loaded the craft with fishing gear. Walking into the house, "Come on, Big Ma, I can eat when we get there." Cush grabbed his plate, "You ready?" Big Ma smiled, "Yeah, let's go." Helping her get into the hovercraft, he buckled her up, "Let's do this." Smiling, Big Ma said, "I'm quite excited to go fishing, it's been so long, and I can take a breather and relax." They flew past the abandoned villages of Barnes, Thomastown, and Mound and then headed north when they arrived in Delta, Louisiana. There were scattered lakes and streams that fed off the Mississippi River before Big Ma said, "Look. Over there, they are jumping out of the water like crazy." Cush hovered over the waters when Big Ma quickly said, "Boy, take this thing back to land. I already don't trust this thing, and if it falls in the water, I'm in trouble." Cush said, "Okay, but you know this floats on water and air. Plus, there are so many cottonmouths on the land. I just didn't want to scare you." Big Ma said, "I can handle the snakes, but this here water is what I'm worried about 'cause I don't float." Cush just smiled, "Okay." They cast their lines into the water and waited. Big Ma had a huge smile on her face. "Big Ma, what are you thinking about with that big ol' smile on your face?" Cush asked. She smiled and said, "Your grandfather brought me out here on our first date, and he played that boy for me." Cush looked at Big Ma, "What, boy?" "It's an old school song. You wouldn't know it." Cush looked at Big Ma, "Now, Big Ma, you know music runs in our family, what's his name?" Big Ma thought about the name. "That boy with the big head started with a group, and it was 3 of them, then he went solo, and later the female member went solo. It's at the tip of my tongue, Howell, no, Howard Heeman or something like that." Cush said, "No, I don't know that song or artist. How the song goes?" Big Ma said, "All I remember is once, twice, and 3 times." Cush laughed, "Oh, that's Howard Hewitt and the group was called Shalimar." Big Ma said excitedly, "Yeah, that's the boy. Do you know it?" Cush thought about it, "Yeah, I think I do. You gonna have to help me remember it." Cush sang, "I remember the first time." Big Ma shouted, "That's it, boy." Cush smiled as he continued, "I danced with you, baby." It was a slow song. The lights were so low. I held you so close I could feel your heart beating next to mine. Then I kissed you. Big Ma joined in as she sang in the background. Once, Cush continued, and my head started spinning. Big Ma sang, twice. Cush continued, like a merry-go-round. Big Ma sang, 3 times, and I fell so deep in love with you, baby, oh. Big Ma shouted, "I got this part." as she finished the verse. Now, we got to sit back and check this thing out, baby, you see. They finished the song together, and Big Ma cried. Cush said, I ain't gonna sing that no more, anytime soon. Big Ma smiled, child, that's tears of happiness and joy. I don't even know what you talking about. Big Ma sat there for a moment, thinking about her husband, then shook her head. Now, where did I leave off with Abooksigun? Asked Big Ma. Cush said, they were in the cave, and Dung made it seem like a mountainside. Big Ma said, oh yeah, the plan would have worked, but ol' Shermake was impatient and ran out too early. When a man named Tomas shot and killed him, the old captain of that ship, Jatem, was furious. Because he saw the slaves as money or crypto in his eyes, but you can't do anything with a dead slave. They didn't even bury the poor man. Abooksigun and the rest ran as fast as possible, but they were knocked out with some kind of gas they used to capture slaves. This is where we come to the story of the Horseshoe. It was a slave ship, as you probably know by now, and little did they know, at the time, it would have been their last trip. They had initially docked near New Orleans to do some fishing because they ran out of food because Tomas had gambled their money away on the island. Forcing some slaves to do the fishing is when Shermake and the twins saw an opportunity and ran away. When they finally caught up to the twins, to their surprise, the two young juveniles, Abooksigun and Dung, were lying there helpless and unconscious on the beach. Are they alive? Tomas asked with excitement. Looks to be, said Jatem. While eyeing the two, Jatem beckons his sons, Jack, Dorsey, and Breg. Jack, you and Dorsey grab the elder one, and Breg, you take hold of that Anakata's youngin. I don't know why he's here with the rest of them, but we'll find out later. These bucks will fetch a fair price on the market. Tomas says with glee. Oh, I hope so. 3,000 CHC for the youngin. And about 2,500 CHC for the older. We will be wealthy boys. It still might be a few extra cryptos without the other one I killed. Jatem, frustrated, looks at Tomas. You and your fool-ass ideas. We can't enslave our own, you fool. If you hadn't gambled the money away, we wouldn't be here in the first place. Bobo growls at the men but is still just a pup, unable to stop them. Breg asks, what about this ugly thing here? Jatem looks at Bobo, take him if we get hungry again. We'll have something to eat other than fish. Jatem said as chilling laughter erupted from them all. Tomas, 45, was an insidious-looking creature. Void of color and paler than most. Albino in appearance. He is the worst off looking among the men, missing his right eye. But Tomas never let that deter him from his prize. Money is his deity, blood is his pleasure. It took 2 hours for the men to reach the Horseshoe with their new captives. It was a massive ship with 4-level cargo holds, which was a complete horror to behold. The captain's cabin was on deck, followed by the crew, storage, and other cargo on the first level of the ship. They used the second and third levels for various exotic foods and animals. They held slaves at the bottom of the vessel. Men were held in the stern while women and children were in the middle and the ship's bow. At first glance, you can tell that this outdated ship has taken its fair share of battles. Part metal and part wood, it is incredible how this contraption remains afloat with gaping holes present upon the bow and hull. The ship appears like a horse's shoe with the middle cut out for water flow. The right side was for the shipmates, and the left was for the enslaved. The ship's center held the engine and a water device that kept it afloat. As the Anakatas got closer to the boat, you could see repairs being made while they docked it at Star of the Living port. Daddy's home. A wicked laugh comes from Tomas's lips. So cruel that even Jatem took notice. Tomas was a shrewd business executive, whom Jatem needed at the time, but never enjoyed his company. Hearing his comment, Jatem says to himself, when we get back to the mainland, I'll make sure that I finish what your father started. But the bullet will land square in between the eyes this time. Breg overhears what his father mumbles. Pa? Breg says concerningly. Mind what I pay you to, boy. Jatam says sharply. Once the Anakata's men reach the ship, Tomas, a shrewd proprietor and a perverted man with unquenchable lust, thinks only about his delights as he craves a little treat. Seeing the thirst in his eyes, a woman screams in terror at Tomas as he reaches to unzip his pants. Determined to seek pleasure, he ignores her screams and aims to relieve himself of his lust for flesh and blood until Jatam calls him out. Jatam pulls out his .357 Genus Magnum and fires one shot inches past Tomas's head into the already tater ship. Tomas ducked along with the entire crew members, searching whence the gunfire came. Now, I'm not going to repeat this. If any of you who touches a slave shall have a burning skull for pay. Tomas, in defiance, stands up and walks towards Jatam, stopping just 2 centimeters from the barrel. With his broken French accent, he mockingly says, Come now, my dear boy Jatam. Tomas looks into Jatam's eyes with intensity. If you are going to kill me, I suggest you do it now. I do not give warning shots. Tomas places his forehead against the barrel, daring the captain to shoot him. Jatam looks at Tomas. I will not let you damage my profits to satisfy your insatiable lust. Tomas laughs uncontrollably. Lust? My insatiable lust, you say? And what of yours, Capitaine? And that bastard hybrid you made? In a calmer and more controlled tone, he continues, Ah. Yes. Tomas exclaims, You didn't think I knew about that female offspring you brought into this world? Did I ever have a time with her? Ha ha ha. A loud blast is heard throughout the ship as brain matter and blood splatter everywhere. All gasp in shock and horror as Tomas's headless body drops like a stone. Now, I will ask this once. Are there any of you who have a problem with how I run my ship? Say so now. At the same time, pointing the gun at his underlings. No? Pointing and waving at 2 men, you too, throw this bastard into the sea, where he belongs. Night falls, and a cool moonlight reflects off the ocean as the creatures of the deep make beautiful ambient sounds, which pierce the ship's hull. Chains creak with the sore wrist of the slaves, who are bound to the walls and wooden floorboards of the Horseshoe. The vessel sets sail and is headed back on course. Dung wakes up to the foul smell and sound of pain and suffering. Dung's fears engulf him as he lies there to the sound of enslaved men and women being torn apart and beaten to death for non-compliance. Abooksigun is chained up in the ship's bowels to a wall. As the hours pass, he is later awakened by Bobo licking his face and crying. Unaware of where he's at, Abooksigun reaches for Bobo. But his hands are jerked back by his restraints, making an irritating clanking sound. Abooksigun is terrified, trying to think of a way to get out. Abooksigun's heart thumps rapidly in his chest. He lifts his head in search of Dung in the darkness but cannot find him. However, the night is not so quiet. Blood-curdling screams break the silence of the night. Even though Tomas is dead, there are crewmen, even Jatam's sons, whose thirst is even greater than Tomas's insatiable lust. Dorsey and Jack have taken several women and young girls to another side of the ship for entertainment and pleasure. Mletsi appears to Dung. Do you not yet know Sabaoth destined your journey? Find Abooksigun and seek enlightenment with these men, for they shall be your warriors, and with Abooksigun, you both shall tear down the Abenians' kingdom. Now, go! With his tiny hands, Dung slips his chains and crawls through the congested body-filled bowel, searching for Abooksigun, calling out to him quietly. Abooksigun hears Dung in the distance and calls back. I am here. Spoken in a low whisper. Dung makes his way over to Abooksigun's voice. Dung? How did you get out? Dung exclaims quietly. My hands were too small for the chains. Abooksigun looks at Dung, saying, Well, aren't you lucky? He struggles against the restraints, but to no avail. Frustrated, Abooksigun says, "Get me out. Find a key or some hard stone to break the lock." A slave by the name LaRouge notices Dung is free from his chains. "Wait. Please don't leave us. We want out too," the slave shouts. Dung couldn't understand the request and ignored the man. So, Abooksigun speaks to the enslaved men, each in their language, assuring them that none will be left behind. Dung opens the heavy steel frame door with much effort. The crew left it slightly ajar from the last inspection of the cargo. As Dung exits the holding compartment for the slaves, he sees a tarnished old-world key hanging on a wall outside the slave quarters. He grabs it and sneaks back in. Because of the darkness, Dung steps on other captives, chained to the floor by accident. The men grunt in pain and curse at Dung for stepping on them. After walking through a slew of bodies and taking great care not to step on anyone else, Dung quickly releases Abooksigun, and they both begin to unlock everyone else. Dung explains to Abooksigun what was said by Mletsi as Abooksigun unchains the men he spoke. Prophetess Akilamalek once said, "Change has never come by simply waiting for it. Those who want it must bring it." Frederick Douglass said, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress." And George Santayana said, "Those who choose to forget the past are doomed to repeat it." You do not have to live in the past to learn from it. It is a book you reference. Therefore, affirmation, confirmation, edification, illumination, and elevation. A bridge to cross the divide between uncertainty and confusion. A ladder for our ascension. Our ancestors routinely referenced the past for clarity into the future. No meaningful success comes without failure. No failure without effort. No effort without the motivation to make it. Motivation comes from conviction. A right is not a privilege. A privilege is given. A right comes with being born. We are mestizos, chosen by Sabaoth to do a great job for him. We must be enlightened to go forward. I understand we come from all walks of life. But we are chosen, so we are destined to do so. You do not have to believe in Sabaoth to be freed, but you have to believe to receive this gift. Even though each man and woman spoke different languages, they heard their language and agreed when he spoke. Before he could finish freeing all the slaves, Abooksigun got caught up in prayer. When he came down, he started preaching to the people as he and Dung helped the people reach enlightenment. They prayed in their language, and after 30 minutes, they, too, spoke in different tongues other than their own. Abooksigun said to the men, "Now, we have power unknown to one another, but Sabaoth shall reveal them to us once we submit to them. Enlightenment is receiving and founding your gift. True enlightenment is mastering this gift. We will do just that on this journey of ours." While he was unlocking the last slave, the chains dropped to the floor, freeing a man named Alda, who screamed from the top of his lungs. Freedom. Freedom at last, from these damn chains. Let's repay these wicked bastards in like kind. He hears a voice, "And how do you plan on doing that?" Clouds uncover the moon, and its shine breaks through the darkness to reveal an aged man known only as Old One. His locks are gray, and a scar from a bullwhip runs across his face. He stands 6'1" and 140 pounds. Old One's eyes are wrinkled with time. He focuses his gaze on Abooksigun. "What troubles you, Old One?" LaRouge says. "We are free. We are free." Old One's gaze does not break from Abooksigun. He intuitively knows Abooksigun as he turns towards LaRouge. "You say you are free because a child frees you? What kind of man are you?" Old One says despitefully. Alda motions to speak, but Old One cuts him off. "We could have been freed years ago." He bellows. Yet nothing but sniveling cowards and weak men boards this ship. Old One, having the gift of second sight, speaks to Abooksigun in his mind while yelling at LaRouge. "I know who you are, young one. Your destiny is not hidden from me. He lets Abooksigun hear his elder self. Lost and forgotten. How long will you remain silent? Abooksigun looks around in confusion and back at Old One, whose eyes are still fixed on him. Do not let. Before Old One could finish his words, reality sets back in, and Abooksigun grabs his head and shakes himself. Old One releases Abooksigun's mind while still yelling at LaRouge. He looks back at Old One but doesn't say a thing as he thinks about his sister yelling at him for not having compassion for Dung, hearing his sister's words, "Lil boy. You must be compassionate and considerate when you talk to people or even explain things. Understand this, and listen carefully because I will only say it once. Because of Pops, we are well versed in history and spiritual things that many don't understand yet, but when you tell someone else, tell them in a manner that they understand. Sometimes you have to give them some background info to explain your point. Treat them like babes, like the Torah tells us you can't give them meat. You must first start with milk." Abooksigun turns to hear LaRouge proclaims rather emphatically, "Old One. You are the true coward. You've been shipbound your whole life here. And not once did you ever have a single thought of freeing anyone on this accursed ship. Not even yourself." Old One hisses at LaRouge, "You spineless cur. How dare you speak that way to me?" Alda vociferates and brings an abrupt end to the argument. "Peace, brethren. Enough cause for blame. Let us be men and act like such. We are all stuck in the belly of the beast while you fight amongst ourselves about nothing. Our women need our help. So, save this belligerence for another time. Now is not." He turns towards Old One, "And would you have our captors know we are free with your wailing?" Alda says somewhat ironically, considering he was the first to scream at the top of his lungs. Old One says nothing else as Alda continues, "No? Then be silent." Alda humbly looks back at Abooksigun, "For I know that it is not our strength, age, intelligence, or anything else that makes one stronger than the rest. Sabaoth chooses whom he chooses to lead." He points at Abooksigun, "Lead the way, young one." Abooksigun, in shock, as he listens to the disrespect, trying to understand it all, looks at Bobo. "Bobo. Find the women." Bobo dashes off as the men follow. The former slaves quietly and quickly move toward the women who were being maliciously assaulted. Abooksigun and the men run into the area where Jatam's sons torment the young women. Cries of agony fill the room. AkunSimBel screams in anguish. "Ah," she cries out for help in her native tongue. "Help! Help! Goddess, no!" Akutukananu, injured, weakened, and bleeding, cries out to her sister, Akun. "Come on, baby. Daddy's about to give you the ride of your life." Dorsey says lustfully while yelling at his brothers, "Yes. Hold her down, Jack, so we can take turns with her." AkunSimBel is held firmly to the bed by Jack. She curses him out in Cometian, an Afro-Asiatic dialect, one of the oldest recorded languages in ancient Egypt. Dorsey spreads AkunSimBel's legs open forcibly. She struggles and resists futilely. The rest of the women cry out in terror. AkunSimBel shrills as she is molested. Abooksigun, Alda, and Dung hear the screams of the women as they sneak down the hallway. Alda becomes unnerved listening to the cries. Another scream shoots through his veins, and he yells, "They are raping the women. Let's go, men." But Abooksigun grabs Alda by the shoulder and pleads with him to wait. "Think wisely. We do not know the situation running in blindly. What if they kill the girls before we get to them? We need a plan." LaRouge exclaims rather vehemently. "And what do you suggest?" "Time is of the essence, we must act now." Abooksigun thinks quickly. He looks at Dung and instantly knows what to do. "We will use Bobo and Dung as a distraction to lure them out and away from the women." Abooksigun searches the hall and sees a loose and rusty pipe. He kicks the pipe, which then breaks from its foundation. Are you going to bludgeon them to death, little one? LaRouge asks impatiently. No. Abooksigun hands the pipe to Dung. Strike first, then run. Lead them out to us. Away from the women. Dung nods. He tiptoes quietly into the room. Dung sees Dorsey mounting AkunSimBel against her will. Her screams echo. Dung is stunned at first and hesitates to enter the room. But Bobo runs in, and the men see him. What is that mutt doing loose? Jack asked and gave chase as Dung, enraged, ran fast at Dorsey. Dung swings the pipe at Dorsey's upper back across his right shoulder. Dorsey's back arches in pain and yelps. Dorsey sees who the culprit is. You motherfucker, you. Come here. He gives chase in his underwear while quickly pulling up his pants and following behind Dung. Dung immediately turns left while Dorsey is hot on his heels. As Dung immediately turns left, Dorsey stops in his place once in the hallway. Jake runs into him literally while chasing Bobo. Come on, Dorsey. Where did that mutt go? Why did you stop? Jack, struck with fear, looks around to see what is holding Dorsey's attention. Time slows, and the hall dims around Alda. LaRouge, Abooksigun, and the others are frozen in place. Piqued at what he sees, Alda feels the wrath of Sabaoth. An unnatural heat soars throughout his entire body. As he stretches forth his right hand, his arm and hand change to a crystal humanoid-like formation that looks like lava flowing through rock-cracked crevasses. Alda's eyes are goldish red. Seraph. Alda says with immense vigor. The hallway vibrates and shudders from the power exercised. A blinding, brilliant light engulfs the wicked brothers. Dorsey and Jack howl as their bodies are burned from within. Charred, blackened, and now lifeless, these former sailors tumble into a pile of ash. The former slaves stare at Alda in total shock. He returns to his original self while watching the steam rise from his fingertips. Surprised, Alda observes his hands and then turns to the men behind him. You've been enlightened, Abooksigun says. Not caring to wait, LaRouge breaks away from the group of men and sees firsthand the severe abuse inflicted on the women as he enters the room. AkunSimBel, terrified, rolls out of the blood-soaked bed in searing pain. Her naked body falls to the wooden floor. She and her sister, Akutukananu, wept woefully. Moved with compassion, Alda and the rest of the men rush to the women's aid. LaRouge reaches AkunSimBel first while Alda walks over to Akutukananu. Alda is hindered from moving forward by a weakened wind vortex that Akutukananu puts in front of him. Her eyes are glowing. She speaks in Cometian. Don't you dare. Enraged and in excruciating pain, she exhausts her energy and can no longer hold the vortex against Alda. Akutukananu collapses, and the vortex drops. Alda moves forward afterward and checks on Akutukananu, who is comatose. Abooksigun walks up to the left of Alda. He quickly closes his eyes upon seeing Akutukananu's exposed body. Alda hits Abooksigun in his chest gently. Get a grip. No time for piety. These women need our help. Abooksigun grabs his sore chest and quickly opens his eyes. He doesn't want to look upon Akutukananu but does what Alda says and tends to her. Alda and LaRouge move to comfort AkunSimBel. She is paranoid, naked, and scared. She spoke Cometian. I cannot speak to her. She keeps babbling and crying. LaRouge says. Alda approaches her cautiously, with his hands up in front of him, showing AkunSimBel that he means no harm. I am not here to hurt you. Those bastards are dead. Alda says fervently. But AkunSimBel does not understand Alda. She keeps babbling on in her native tongue. Covering her body with her arms and hands, she crawls into a fetal position, pleading with Alda not to harm her. Alda cannot convince AkunSimBel that he means no harm. So, Abooksigun walks over to the terrified girl, mimicking Alda's posture. Abooksigun began blaming himself for what happened to the twins. We should have came in instead of waiting. I should have been more compassionate instead of trying to map out a solution. I'm always thinking, never. And then quickly thought about how he disappointed his family, so he thought, for being nonchalant, ran through his mind. The feeling overwhelmed him, and he began tearing up and ran to the other side of the ship. After a moment of silence, he started crying and singing one of his father's favorite songs out of his belly. Running back to you, by commission, how can you forgive me when I've often gone astray? How can you think of me when I do things my way? Turning my back from you, the one who loved me first. Having my own desires. Renewing worldly thirst. He sat there when he heard, "You sound so beautiful when you sing," Agata said as she and Dung walked out of the shadows. Still upset, Abooksigun said to her, "My father wrote poetry to express how he felt. If only he knew how to sing, to express himself, he would have won millions more. I realized this recently, and I think that is what Sabaoth needs me to do." Agata smiled. This is no one's fault but those who caused the pain to them. Come, let's return, for you are desperately needed. Abooksigun wipes his eyes and translates to AkunSimBel what Alda had said and that he was on their side. LaRouge grabs a sheet from a nearby bed and carefully covers AkunSimBel, who jumps from the sheet touching her skin. She is trembling in pain but relaxes slightly. Still scared and quite frightened, AkunSimBel asks, "Where is my father? Where are we?" And yelps in pain. She looks to her left to see her sister unresponsive. "My sister. Anu," AkunSimBel says frantically, which is Akutukananu's nickname. Akutukananu has fainted unconsciously. Abooksigun searches around, looking for another sheet to cover Akutukananu. He finds none. Are there any other sheets on this godforsaken ship? Abooksigun yells. All searches were in vain for a sheet for Akutukananu. One of the young women named Deabra, who was in the room with the sisters, goes to a crude-looking bathroom to the right of where the bed sits within the chamber and finds a huge brown towel inside a cabinet with a broken door. This would cover Akutukananu's body, she said as she grabbed the towel from the cabinet and took the towel to Abooksigun. "Here, take this towel," she urges Abooksigun. He takes it and covers Akutukananu. "No. She cannot stay that way." Surprised at her outburst, Abooksigun questioned Deabra. "She cannot stay that way. What do you mean?" Deabra explains to Abooksigun why. All the while, Old One stood inside the doorway watching. He's a bit taken aback by what he saw but not surprised. "She has the gift of the goddess. An elemental," AkunSimBel said. "Voice of many waters," she shouted as the room filled with fog. Dark clouds formed, and lightning flashed and thunderclaps. Akutukananu levitates from the floor. At this moment, AkunSimBel panics. She cannot control her gift. Unconscious, Anu wakes up. AkunSimBel cries out to Akutukananu. Akutukananu, while hovering in the air, faces her darkest fears buried deep into her subconscious mind. Eyes tightly shut, she flails in the air and hears many voices speak as one. She whimpers. "In the beginning, Sabaoth created heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Ruach of Sabaoth moved upon the face of the waters. And Sabaoth said, Let there be light. And there was light. And Sabaoth said, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters and let it divide the waters under the firmament from the waters above the firmament. And it was so. Sabaoth called the firmament heaven. And Sabaoth said, Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and let dry land appear, and it was so. And Sabaoth called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas, and Sabaoth saw that it was good. An abnormal hurricane appears out of nowhere. The storm growls. What is that? Jatam shouts. The men on the deck run for cover as the battery from the storm covers the ship, causing substantial damage. Lightning strikes one mast, and it topples. Jatame and his men try to maintain the vessel as the storm wreaks havoc. Lightning strikes are heard even in the Bowel's vessel. Meanwhile, Alda asks Abooksigun, "Can you speak to her?" Wind and rain mixed bands swirl inside the room. Abooksigun shakes his head, no. AkunSimBel frees as she too is lifted into the air, and her power overcomes her. Their eyes turn a smoke-like blue. The twin sisters share the same gift. It is just divided up between the both of them. They are one. One sister has the voice of many waters, or Mida Netcher, while the other has the gift of life, or Netcher Re. The coverings wrap around the two sisters tightly because of the wind that picked up from a mini-storm forming inside the slave quarters of the ship. They hover around each other, absent of consciousness. A voice in the darkness calls out to Anu, Akutukananu. She says apprehensively, "I am here." "Who calls to me?" Tears fill her eyes as she continues, "I'm scared. I can't control it. Help me." Akutukananu says shamefully, "They have viciously attacked me. I am broken and couldn't protect my sister." A storm roars in the background, showing a beast traveling inside a cloud formation. "I was too weak." The creature in the storm fed off of Akutukananu's fears and pain. The beast let out a hideous growl, "You are mine. I own your mind, body, and soul. You will never be rid of me." It grows more assertive in her mind. Anu weeps in anguish, and her tears become a river as she weeps bitterly. Akutukananu is lying face down in the abyss. When all hope seemed lost, a bright light shined through the darkness. It was during this time that Anaya poured the sand into the sea. Unknowing what she had done, the same light appeared upon the sea, spreading throughout the planet upon the waters. The light was so marvelous it warded off the beast battling for control of Akutukananu's mind. A triumphant chorus of angelic beings sings, "Holy, holy, holy, art thou." Trumpets blow. The beast bellowed, "No. She's mine. I own her body, mind, and soul." The angelic beings harmonize to a crescendo. An unknown voice says, "Peace, be still." The beast shatters into pieces as if it were one with the storm, forcing it to fade away. The chorus of angels fades away while proclaiming, "Holy, holy, holy, art thou." The Holy One approaches Akutukananu, lying face first into the abyss of nothingness. She feels a holy being wrap his arms around her, comforting the grieving young woman. The spirit seems at first to be Akutukananu's father, Jabrabra. "Baba?" she says while becoming familiar with the warmth of the embrace. Where were you?" She can barely get her words out. "I miss you so much. Why did you leave us to fend for ourselves? They attacked, raped, and beat us. We were enslaved on this ship for as long as I can remember. Snatched from our home, Baba. Where were you, Baba?" she demands. "I have always been here, my daughter, as I am now. There is not one tear shed that I do not value. Not one voice cries out into the darkness that I do not hear. Nor is there any pain or wound that I cannot heal." Mshika cradles Akutukananu's chin and looks her in the eyes. She slightly gasps. "Who? Baba?" As Akutukananu gazes into the eyes of the Almighty, she sees all power as no living thing has ever seen. All the while sensing compassion, love, and patience, the kind only a father could give. "Yes?" Mshika answers. At the same time, tilting his head to the right. Akutukananu gaps again. His eyes reflect all the stars of heaven and an eternal burning fire. Akutukananu asks, "You are a god?" Re? Multiple voices speak at once, Mshika, Mletsi, Sabaoth. "I am, that I am. The living God." Mletsi whispers in Hebrew, Malek HaMelekim, which means kings of kings. Mletsi speaks this inside of Akutukananu's inner ear, and it echoes. Akutukananu looks around in confusion, only for a moment, but she reconnects her gaze with Mshika. His eyes are like a burning furnace. Fear takes over her. And she says nervously and humbly, "My Lord and my God, who gave me these gifts, how can I serve you?" Mshika speaks, "Follow Abooksigun and Dung. Do my will, and all your questions will be answered in due time. Evil shall come for you and your sister, but know I am with you always." Akutukananu bows her head in submission. Multiple voices speak as one. "Seek out the path of former's time. Behold, I give you peace of mind." The spirit's voices faintly echo and fade away.